You're listening to What's Contemporary Now, a show about culture and the people, places, and things that together make it up.
I can say to my new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, hey, find a keto-friendly restaurant nearby and text it to Beth and Steve. And it does, without me lifting a finger. So I can get in more squats anywhere I can. 1, 2, 3.
Will that be cash or credit?
Credit. 4.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that does the heavy lifting so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Compatible with select apps. Requires Google Gemini account. Results may vary based on input. Check responses for accuracy.
Claire Thomson-Jonville is not your typical Vogue editor, and that's precisely the point. If you're familiar with her Instagram, you already know she's long been steeped in the very aesthetics that define the magazine she now leads. While she is in fact British, she has no shortage of fluency when it comes to identifying with the DNA evoked by the name French Vogue. As the newly appointed head of editorial content, she steps into a role rooted in mythology, following in the footsteps of figures who defined entire eras of style. But while Claire brings something different, she's also deeply committed to reinstating the codes of a bygone era, when Vogue Paris was very much a part of the cultural conversation.
This is Claire Thomson-Jonville, and we're talking about what's contemporary now.
Claire Thomson-Jonville, before we dive into things, and obviously the French Vogue of it all, tell us about your formative years growing up in the UK.
I was born in Scotland. I then spent most of my education in England. I have been obsessed with magazines since I could actually not read. My mother always used to say that in my crib I had fashion magazines. My dad worked in sports retail all his life, so I was always surrounded by like the latest sneakers and Nike logos. He worked a lot with Nike growing up and sort of used to travel a lot to the US. And I didn't really think anything of it at the time, but I think like now subliminally I'm like, wow, that's probably where the sneaker obsession and that sort of culture, I just grew up with it. I studied law at the University of Edinburgh, purely because I don't want to sound boastful, but I had really exceptional grades, Christopher.
I believe it.
I wanted to go to art school at one point, and my mom was just like, look, you've got such good grades, like go to law school. I did have kind of aspirations of being a journalist. And actually, weirdly, I had a very specific career in mind when I went to the careers office. So you were sort of obliged to go to the careers office, and they said, what do you want to be? And I was like, I'd like to be a copywriter. And in my mind, I wanted to write slogans for advertising campaigns. And when I was 13, I thought that was going to be my job. I also always loved magazines and images. And my grandfather actually was a kind of a keen photographer. So he taught me a lot about film and shooting on Leica and Nikon and stuff like that when I was young. So I definitely had a very creative upbringing, if not quite traditional.
And how does one then make the jump from having been pushed into studying law by your mother and pursuing a career in fashion?
I think there was a lot that I got out of studying for law. Research, navigating the library in a very intelligent way, deep diving on subjects. Like there was a lot that I got out of it finally. And I sort of specialized in certain topics, and I managed to cross law with French. So I did have access to like the creative arts. So I specialized in like French cinema 1 year. And I came over to the Sorbonne for a year to study lettres modernes, like sort of contemporary literature. And that was really interesting and sort of a creative awakening for me. It was a very interesting time in Paris. I remember that I got a job, part-time job. I was really like 19, writing reviews for Time Out, which was like a thing back then. Yeah, I sort of started from there basically. And I wrote about contemporary art and exhibitions, met Sarah from Colette at that time. You know, that was the whole high point of like more like the creative directors of Vogue. You know, that was like a real innocent vineyard. We're like shooting Balenciaga campaigns. Like that for me was such an epic time in France and Paris. I was so happy to be here. And then I met Ezra at that time as well. I went back to finish my studies and then moved to Paris shortly after that to start a self-service.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that because obviously we've had both Ezra and Suzanne on the show. And I would imagine, given the length of time you spent at self-service and the role you played, it was quite a formative period.
It was a long time ago, but in some ways it was yesterday. You know, it was like such an important part. It's almost like a sort of an extended education because a lot of my creative DNA comes from there. I was, as they say in French, like a couteau suisse. Like I did a little bit of everything. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity that I had at that time. I mean, it was a small team, but really amazingly talented team. And the projects that we're working on at the time were really, when I think about it, quite incredible. Ezra has such a unique vision. I'm so lucky to work so closely with Suzanne. It's just like the discipline, the rigor, the attention to detail. I've kept a lot of that with me, obviously developed my own taste over the years, but I've very much sort of remembered these codes and ways of working and love for the creativity, but also in a very regulated and quite specific and organized way. And I think also from self-service, as I said, I'm very grateful to Ezra and Suzanne because the magazine was really at that time a place where everybody wanted to work, everybody wanted to be in self-service, and everybody wanted to bring their best work. And it was an interesting time as well because I was able to kind of go into that shift into digital, what that looked like, working on co-branded projects before co-branded projects were really even properly a thing, and just working with some of the photographers that I'm working with now. So, and it's funny like that, fashion. It is like a very small world.
Well, before French Vogue, as you mentioned, you did wear many hats, as one does working at an independent title. And when you had made that foray into freelance, how did you find that kind of adjustment and the way people sort of understood what position you now held or what position you were looking to hold? How did that differ from having been in-house at a title before?
It's completely different. But I think any creative will tell you that. It's such a leap of faith to jump out on your own. But then you have to, at some point, it's like you need to test yourself. And for me, it was like we'd entered the Instagram age and there were so many opportunities. And I don't know, it just like entered a new chapter of my life. And I didn't specifically know what my title was going to be or what I was going to do. I just wanted to create and collaborate. But I always have seen the business opportunities and ways of collaborating between the creative and the business. So I just sort of continued doing that. But a lot of it as well is the company you keep and the inspiring people. I always looked for or sought out people whose work I admired or people who maybe shared the similar vision to me. There's certain people that have been like that throughout my life, but I've sort of either sought them out or they've sought me out, or we found a way to sort of connect.
It's funny, you talk about the people that you surround yourself with, because again, before we jump into the French Vogue of it all, you and Alistair had worked together previously during his reign as global editor-in-chief of ID, where you served as the editorial director for its French edition. And I was curious as to what that entails, because of course we think of British when we imagine ID, but what was the role you played there when you guys were working together?
It's interesting because I spent probably a lot of time actually explaining to people what my role was while I was in it. And maybe a lot of people didn't really understand. For me, that was an absolutely pivotal role that probably got me partly to where I am now, because I really got a massive immersion into digital business, scale, syndication, a lot of just like nuts and bolts stuff, and sort of look at how I built my career. And I needed to have that to be able to be where I am now and to really work at a company like Condé Nast with sort of global objectives and targets and traffic and audience and all those kind of things. So when I was at ID, it was really about connecting with the French market. It was obviously a lot of digitals, a lot of like co-branded opportunities, working with brands, etc. But also that happened during COVID. I got hired by confirmation. It was the first day of lockdown. So I had a Zoom with like hundreds of people introducing myself, and then proceeded to not see anyone for the year and a half. But that was interesting as well. And somehow in a strange way, maybe worked in my favor, because then we were all digital and we were all at home. And it didn't really matter if you were print or digital or whatever. When I worked away from publishing and media, I knew why I was doing it, but I sort of secretly missed it in the end. Always came back to me. And I was like, I loved just the possibility of having a platform and being able to give people an opportunity to kind of talk about subjects. It's a form of curation, ultimately.
100%. I always say that the primary sort of product of media is curation, right? Because it really boils down to what it is you're distilling from the larger subset of information we all share. And that's what people choose to subscribe to or not. But having shared that past with Alistair at an independent title, what felt like a good reason to reunite under the banner of Vogue?
It was like, okay, who's my team? It was the first question about the job, the vision, of course, the creativity and how to get there. And it's all about your creative collaborators. Who are you working most closely with and whose vision you're more aligned with? Alistair and I have a very similar vision of the woman and you know, I just trust him. And the models love him. He can call a photographer and make things happen very quickly. It's funny because this role, I think, has probably evolved quite a lot over the years. The role that I have from the days of Karine or Emmanuel, as society has kind of evolved. So I have a lot of caps on and a lot of things I have to do, and making images is just one of them. And we talk about a magazine, but we talk about platform. You know, I'm very involved in the business aspect. So having a creative partner, he really is my creative partner, who is totally aligned with the vision, has great ideas, and who just can go off and, you know, realize the mood board of my dreams. We talk about French Vogue. One of the key aspects was really like embracing the Frenchness and getting back to the DNA. And Alistair and I have very similar view on that. So I grew up with French Vogue, and Vogue Italia were like my favorites, you know, Franca, Carine's the Queen, you know, Emmanuel's. So for me, it was like, what does that look like, but now in 2025? I mean, I say this with like total humility. I'm not comparing myself to a designer, but if you were to take a maison, you would look at the archives and you have an idea already what the DNA is, and you put your own interpretation and you put your own twist on it, and you can look back, but you don't stay in the past. And I am not ashamed to say, and I think anybody who knows my Instagram or knows me, is that I'm quite French Vogue anyway. So it's not a stretch for me to be there and to sort of imagine like what that is now. I mean, I'm very lucky with Anna, who's really supportive since the beginning. I mean, it's actually quite incredible. I sometimes pinch myself about how lucky I am in terms of the creative freedom that I have with Vogue. And she absolutely understands that Vogue France needs to feel French. And I think that this is a kind of a new chapter for Vogue. Shooting more in France, sort of reconnecting with the community here. Like a lot of the brands are luxury brands and Maison are obviously based here. And I, you know, have a fair amount of experience working with them over the years. So in some sense, I guess there was like not a reassurance from the general fashion industry, but maybe there's a sense of like, you kind of know sort of what you're going to get. And maybe that's quite nice in a way, you know.
I did love her quote stating that you're the absolute embodiment of French chic, even though you were born in Scotland. But has anybody made comments? I'm assuming someone said something about a Brit running French Vogue.
Oh, Daily Mail.
Okay, so that type of a thing.
I can't remember what it was now, but nobody said anything because nobody really knows that I'm not French. Like, this is like the scoop. It's like, because I have a double name, it's like I could be French.
Yeah, I honestly thought it was like Thomson-Jonville or something.
Yeah, it is.
Quite bougie. Yeah.
Say Thomson-Jonville. I speak fluent French. I mean, I've spent, you know, X amount of years here. I'm quite funny in French, and I think that's always a sign. You know, I can make pull a good gag in French. My kids are French. I'm absolutely, you know, rooted in French culture, but somehow I think this like dual thing, it helps me because I'm French enough for French people. And then I'm Anglo-Saxon enough for Vogue US and, you know, Vogue UK and all this sort of business. There's a certain language, you know, this sort of like business. I keep going on about business, but it's a big part of what we're working on here. The fact that I'm not French serves me at this stage of the role. It's like I understand the French culture enough. I've lived here long enough. I speak the language well enough, but I've got a slightly outsider's perspective. And throughout my whole career, I've pretty much always kind of framed myself on slightly being an outsider, and it's always kind of served me quite well. So that's why it's not that big of a deal. And I'm very flattered that Anna said that about me. What can I say? She's the queen.
She is. And she's also known for exerting a great deal of control over the umbrella that is Vogue and Condé Nast. And you've just mentioned that you have an amazing amount of freedom. And so how would you describe the difference in your role as head of editorial content versus the former iterations being editor-in-chief?
I think we all know that it's quite an abstract title within the industry. It's sort of like we know what it means and we know kind of what the job is, but it's the fact that it's sort of a blanket term for like across market. I think we know like why that's in place. afterwards, I think you kind of make the role what you want it to be, or you kind of incarnate that role. For me, it's sort of a mix between like an editor-in-chief, a creative director, content creator, and a business strategist. I don't know. There's a lot of elements that go into that, and it changes every day. I would have loved like the Carine era to have more video. There was no video back in the Carine era. There was no social media. She would have nailed that, I'm sure. I have a lot of ambition, believe me. And with Alistair, we have a lot of things planned, but it's a step-by-step process. This is issue 4. Sales are up. Like, it's insane how, like, the percentage of our sales from our first issue, I think it was up like 36% year on year in print, and it just keeps going up and up and up. I obviously changed the typography and the layouts. And I think the more we keep going, the more I know Anna and the more closely I work with her. There's a kind of a confidence and definitely a synergy between us. She knows that I'm a fan. I just really admire her discipline, her work ethic. She's hands-on in the sense that like she can really help me do a lot of things and gives me really great advice. She was like, Claire, you really know how to make a magazine. I was like almost passed out because I was like, you know, high praise from someone that I've admired for a long time.
Well, it sounds like essentially you're making the same amount of decisions as editors-in-chief did in that role in the past. It's just with a different title, but it feels like you have a lot of freedom.
In terms of like creative, just in sort of general, I work a lot with Raul Martinez. I don't know if you know Raul. He's amazing. The global creative director. And I was like, Raul, I just want to change everything. He was like, I've been waiting for you. I've been waiting for someone to want it, like, let's go. And then I was like, I want to bring in Alistair. And he was like, oh my God, yes. And it's just like conversations like that. It's like, I'm in the right place. We're all aligned. I'm learning as well. Like, I still feel like an intern in my mind. I definitely have moments of, can I do that? Like, are we allowed to do that? Like, is this the thing? And it's like, you've got to keep this freshness and this kind of agile way of thinking of things. And I think also that's why I'm here. You know, Anna said to me, Claire, use your entrepreneurial skills. So that's what I'm doing. And I always think of like my daughter or young girls, you know, like that was me growing up. What would be a positive message? Like, what's uplifting and but cool? I grew up in the 90s, early 2000s, and there was a lot of good in magazine publishing, but it was also quite toxic as a young woman. The conversations about body image and you know, just in general, having it all. You can't have it all. Something's got to give, have more sex, lose some weight before the summer. So that's really sort of the opposite of where I am now. And I always think about, you know, young men and women and trying to bring something quite, in French, we say énergique. It's like energy, you know, it's like a sort of a contributing to the energy of the cultural energy of the time. And whether you like a cover or you don't like a cover, it's about taste, that's okay. But it's about, you know, just understanding the work. Like, we're trying to shift the dial in our own way and doing our thing. And there's a place for everyone. Paris seems to be a place that people want to come and work in, and is very proud, obviously, to the position that I have and the opportunities that I'm able to even offer to people in the community and give them a platform. So that's what I'm excited about in Paris right now.
There's no shortage of things to be looking forward to. I have toyed with the idea of moving there myself, if I'm honest. But with Vogue being a brand that very much curates its perspective through the lens of luxury in general, you seem to have brought already in these initial issues an element that's a little bit more grounded in the human experience.
I think that just like we move with the times, right? It's a very uncertain time politically and economically, you know, just in terms of what I imagine a reader would like to read or consume in terms of content. Either makes you dream and go far away, or something that's slightly more realistic, like wellness, which is something that you can participate in without necessarily having to spend also a lot of money. Future classics, for example, it's like shopping your own wardrobe, finding vintage pieces and reinterpreting vintage. I think it's like our responsibility to document the times. And there is moments where, you know, like if you look at the runways shows that just happened, like there was a lot of fake fur everywhere. It was like the return to kind of dressing up and heels and stockings. So that's coming. But we just did something extremely minimal for April because it was sort of about vintage and more about sort of what is luxury? It's simplicity. What is luxury? It's time, it's space, it's timelessness. It's maybe no makeup. That's pretty luxurious to do that in a fashion magazine. It's pretty luxurious to put a pair of knickers on a full page in a fashion magazine today. But that's sort of the statement as well. In the next issue, it's full fashion. The portfolio that we did in March with Mario Sorrenti, we shot, I think it was 28 or 32 women. And that felt like a statement about fashion. It was about muses. It was exciting because it felt like I hadn't done that in Vogue for a while.
I also wanted to hear your opinion on things like AI. We've seen it explored on the brand side. How do you view that from an editorial perspective in terms of content generation?
To be honest, I'm just getting started with shooting the girls and really like reconnecting with certain girls. And we know Vogue, like just globally, it's like that balance between celebrities and models. I feel like French Vogue has always been very model. Of course, I'm looking at it. Of course, I'm researching on it. I'm having different conversations about how and what makes sense and special projects, etc. I'm not like living in a bubble, but I don't see it replacing in any way any type of shoot, or maybe it's a tool that can be used in certain ways. I'm like Mrs. ChatGPT. Like the moment that I realized that you could take a photo of your fridge and ask ChatGPT, what can I make for dinner? That was a breakthrough for me. Also, like my kids' homework, like it really, I don't know, I'm digressing.
No, not at all. I think these are all relevant examples because I was going to say, well, what's your personal relationship to technology? And you've clearly just shared it.
I'm quite techie. In a second life, in a parallel universe, I would probably be a graphic designer, maybe, or just have notions. I mean, the number of times I've taken like InDesign classes, like I could probably teach an InDesign class at this point, but I love editing. I love video editing as well. I'm like a secret nerd about video editing. So there's certain things that I'll like zone in on. And I always say to my kids, like things that you wish you kind of know when you were growing up, you know, because the job that I have now probably, even though I definitely wanted to be, very specifically wants to be editor-in-chief of Vogue when I was like 12. I mean, I've always been very specific. But even today, when I talk to my children about it, it's always good to have technical, quite specific skills, whether it's like layouts and retouching and all these kind of things, knowing how to use certain tools, I think are just like super useful. But that's another thing about being like a couteau suisse and having done all those different levels in the different jobs.
Being able to grasp all sides of a process is definitely going to help you as an editor and a leader, right? I mean, people always say that Stephen Meisel can do the styling, the hair, and the makeup himself as well. It's a little bit of a pivot backwards, but only because you did make a very relevant reference to the kind of DNA of French Vogue being that sort of hybrid of models and talent. And you guys have Addison Rae on the March cover. And I wanted to hear from you what the thought process behind that idea was. Why Addison? Why now?
I mean, obviously Addison, obviously now, like she's the new pop star. Let's be honest. I think she's just so interesting as a kind of modern phenomenon. We cast that shoot, actually, if you want to know the honest truth. When we shot that, we didn't know who was going to be the cover. We were like, may the best person and the most inspiring person on the day have the cover. And it was like, you do know Addison's going to be there. We're like, yeah, but there's a lot of really interesting talents on that shoot. And I actually kind of like to work that way as well. And so does Alistair. So she was just absolutely, it was just so obvious when she came on set and she just gave it all. And she's really inspiring and cool. And also like, why not? Fuck it. Like, I think it's kind of exciting. It's a little bit disruptive, but I think French Vogue can be quite disruptive. If you're going to choose a celebrity, in inverted commas, she's what my definition of a celebrity is in terms of like that resonance of TikTok is like she's really famous and resonates with a certain demographic. What do you think of that cover? Do you like it?
No, I loved it. I thought it was very French Vogue, and it kind of gave me a little bit of a playback to that Paris Hilton moment when it felt like a faux pas that became a faux oui, you know, like it was.
I love that.
And I heard a funny rumor, which after having had this conversation with you, I'm starting to think was true. Did you actually take the majority of your interview meetings at the gym in New York? How does one arrange for that to happen?
I was explaining this to someone the other day. It was like, remember back in the days when like a lot of deals used to get made on the golf course? Like that was a thing. Like there would be the CEOs and like the presidents of companies would go off and play like 18 holes and then come back and like a new conglomerate was made. Well, this is in my small way. through sport and wellness, like you kind of connect with people in a different way. And I don't know, I find it sometimes my most interesting conversations or breakthroughs that I have with certain people are through the prism of sports and wellness. Like the CEO of Condé Nast is really into sports and competition. Mark Guiducci, who I love from American Vogue, is really into sports. Like just around me, I just love a good gym chat. But I mean, it's a bit of a myth as well. Like, obviously, I'm not doing all my meetings from the gym. I'm not like always in leggings and with dumbbells. But like, I do integrate that when I can, because I just think it's good to get out of the office and to be able to get people out of the context of a boardroom and be able to have a bit of a kind of one-to-one chat.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. I feel like you were big on retreats.
Retreats were like my thing. Oh my God, we didn't even talk about the retreats. Yeah. But that's another thing where I just decided like one day, my mom told me about this the other day. She's like, well, remember when you just said that you were going to start like a retreat company? She's like, remember that? I was like, yeah, you mean the retreat company that like sold out like every time? It was insane, the success that had, but I kept it very small. And I wanted to keep it me with a small group, silence. And instead of like doing loads, I just increased the number of days. It was like 6 days, total silence, connecting with nature, digital detox. People trusted me to like give away their phones. It was really beautiful. It was like precious, as beneficial and nourishing for me as probably the people that came there. And what's really interesting is the people who attended those retreats are still in contact with me. So I'm really bringing my expertise and the learnings that I have from all that and bringing that into Vogue now and really stepping into the retreats and wellness space. We've got our first Vogue France 3 days of wellness retreat in Paris, end of June.
Amazing.
So yeah, and then it will keep going and lots of plans for that. So.
And is that an unprecedented initiative with Vogue? I feel like I've never heard of that under a Vogue brand.
Yeah, I mean, there's been beauty events, but this is very different. I really wanted it to be a transformational experience, and I'm really excited with the partners. It's like people that for me are super legit. I would only ever do this because it's so important to me if the people were legit and if it was going to be an actual transformational experience and not just like a free pair of legs is going to sound bad. Yeah, so you should come.
I'll look it up or send me the details. And we can't let you go without asking the namesake question, which is, of course, what is contemporary now?
What is contemporary now? Knowing yourself and following your instincts is contemporary now.
I would imagine that comes in handy as an editor of Vogue France.
Oui, oui.
Merci beaucoup.
De rien. C'était un plaisir pour moi.
Pour moi aussi. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of What's Contemporary Now. A special thanks to our producer, Sasha Grindblatt. Audio post-production by Chase Coughlin with original theme music by Joseph Top-Miller and Chase Coughlin of The Black Soft. And visual design by Aaron Meager and Graham Prentice. Subscribe now to be the first to catch new episodes each week. And if you've enjoyed listening, we'd love to hear from you. Leave us a review and let us know your thoughts. Your feedback helps us improve and reach more listeners like you. Follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn for additional content and join the conversation. Let us know what you think is contemporary now.